Hey friends and music makers, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever wondered how some producers develop that special, unique sound that really stands out? Well, this week I'm kind of ditching presets completely to show you how starting from scratch can actually speed up your growth as a producer. You'll discover how working with limitations can push your creativity and help you to develop your own signature sound faster. I'll be breaking down making sounds from scratch, benefits of doing so, some proven techniques for making unique sounds. So join me as we explore how setting limitations can push your creativity and help you develop your signature sound faster. Got any questions? Drop them in the comments and let's learn and grow together. Don't forget, by the way, if you enjoy the content on the channel, to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. My mission here is to help you level up your production skills and unlock your full creative potential. So without further ado, let's dive into today's stream. Good afternoon, Xavi Diaz. Muy buenas tardes. Great to have you on board. And if somebody else is there as well, do say hello, just like Xavi Diaz. Drop a hello in the chat. Let us know how you're doing. Let us know where you tuned in from. Be great to hear. And as I said, if you've got any questions, pop them in there. So let's do a quick test. Hopefully already the microphone is good. Let's have a little bit of a snippet of the sort of music idea we might end up with today. We're obviously going to start from scratch, but this is just something to test the levels, but also give us a bit of inspiration. So, all looks good. I believe we have music working and a microphone working, which is great. So we are going to reboot Ableton to a brand new live set. I'm not going to save anything there. And then we're going to get stuck in. So as always, there's a bit of a story behind each week. Generally, how did I come up with the title and the idea and the inspiration for doing a video a little bit about presets and actually not using them? So there's a gentleman in the music industry, quite famous in electronic music, goes by the name of Daniel Miller, and he was or is the owner of a record label called Mute. And obviously, actually on that label there are many great artists, but some artists in particular that a lot of you would know about, I'm sure, is Depeche Mode, who released, I think, pretty much all of their albums on Mute, Daniel Miller's label, except for maybe one album. So you've got artists like that putting out music on his label. Daniel Miller himself, well known for techno, minimal techno as well, producer in his own right. And what it was I was listening to him doing a lecture actually for Ableton Live, not a lecture, sorry, a conversation about music and his label and producing and all those great things. And during that conversation, he spoke about that he was kind of anti-presets. And he gave a good reasoning behind that, in the sense that he felt that if you sort of don't rely on presets and use them, you tend to learn the instruments quicker and faster by, just putting them into your projects and just learning how that particular instrument works. The same as, I think we can think about it a bit like receiving a computer or a synthesizer or something that didn't come with a manual. And back in the day, we used to buy lots of secondhand synthesizers. If the TB-303, for example, the famous Roland acid machine, if that came with a manual, perhaps no one would have ever discovered that it actually made these really quirky, weird acid sounds, because that wasn't what it was designed to do. So Daniel was talking about he was anti-presets. Now that might upset some people because they feel that presets are very useful, and they are very useful, but I do like the line that he was thinking about, and that is that, as I said, if we start to make our own sounds without presets, we do tend to learn faster. And okay, our sounds might not be amazing to begin with, but they're ours. And that's how we can kind of get a bit closer to a unique sound quicker over time, because we learn exactly what an instrument does instead of plonking serum or pigments or operator and just leaning on the presets. We're always then relying that someone else programmed that really well and that's it. And obviously everyone else has access to those. So I'm not going to go on too much longer, but a couple of other little notes that I took from him speaking was that he mentioned when you're making electronic music, it's really important that you create your own sounds, and if possible, you have the ability to create your own instruments. Now, again, in VST world and software, we can make our own instruments with some of the modular programs that are around, Max for Live, but we can also layer up synths to make our own instruments. So we're going to do a bit of that today. I also liked his comment, limitation is liberation. I really love that. So that's kind of giving you a little bit of the background about why we're trying today. In fact, if you're familiar with this channel, most of the videos I don't use a lot of presets unless I'm trying to demonstrate how that might work, how we might use those creatively. So today we're just going to make stuff from scratch, and it's going to be without presets, Ableton Live instruments, and try and get a nice sound from them. So let's get stuck in with that. Let's maybe have a wavetable from the cabinet and bring that in. And let's have a bit of a metronome for the starters, and let's have a bit of a tempo of around 128. We might also have a key. Let's go B minor. Quite a fan of B minor, the scale B minor. Let's have a look at what notes we have in B minor. Kind of obviously our root note is B. Our second interval is C sharp. We've also got F sharp, and then that is the fifth, which is interesting. So the dominant is a sharp, a black key. And yeah, we've got G, A, B, E, those two sharps, and a D as well. So good scale, I like it. Let's use B minor. Let's put in some notes and start getting a bit of just a pattern going. And what I'm going to try and work on first is going to be the lead. So I'm going to try and make here straight away a kind of quirky, interesting lead if I can. That will be the catalyst for everything else. So instead of drums, instead of the bass line, instead of a vocal, things like that, I'm going straight in to try and come up with a bit of a lead of some sorts. Got to do a bit of programming, I think, to start with. I'm not probably going to play it, but let's see. So let's have a B. Let's have also a B an octave higher. So we use maybe just a few notes from the scale. We could also have the third then, which is going to be the D of the scale. And we could also have the fifth, which we established is the F sharp, right? So maybe we do a little bit of F sharp, then down to C, something like that. And then we're going to spread it out a bit. So let's say we mute these for a second. We could actually also come back down to the B here, or even pop in the seventh or the sixth. Okay, so just to get a bit of a pattern going, that's good enough for now. Just a little sequence kind of pattern here with a bit of note length variety. Let's also, while we're here, get these notes and randomize the velocity a bit. Always like to do that. So we've got a little bit of humanizing going on with that. Bring the number down till a bit lower so they're not too extreme, right? The higher the number, obviously the further apart the velocity is on the randomization. So I like mine just to be a little bit. Let's feel what that's like. Okay, great. So mainly what I'm going to be doing here is, so we've got a pattern here, but also it's going to be working on the synth sound from scratch, no preset, and effects. I think I'll be using some effects, but first of all, I want to sort of like really work on the synth sound itself, but I probably will have a hybrid reverb in there and we'll develop the sound a bit as well with that side of things. But first, mainly in the synth itself. So what we could do straight away is kind of have a little bit of a different wave shape. So let's maybe say square. And let's also make a few other changes. Let's make it monophonic over here. so we're not actually in chords or anything like that, so we can play just single voices. So monophonic is going to be useful here, I think, for the actual synth itself. And then the next thing I'm going to do is start to get a little bit of sort of movement happening in the synth here. So we could kind of make the volume envelope a little bit different to how it is. That's the amp envelope here. Let's have a play with that a bit. Just get that somewhere like that for the moment. And then let's sort of start by, let's say, just on the oscillator side of things, let's get that moving around a little bit different. And I'd quite like to have, I'm going to have the two oscillators, but let's maybe start with this oscillator as a bit of a different shape to just the basic shape. And we're going to have a basic shape, but maybe we'll have that on oscillator 2. So oscillator 2, I might just have as a square wave like so. But oscillator 1, I think I'm going to look for a little bit more character. So let's sort of maybe come into some of these other sort of more tastier sections and see if we can find something in here that we like, you know, that kind of gives us something a little bit more interesting. So this one's kind of interesting for now. We can also change this in a moment, but it gives us a sort of starting point. So what I want to do here is we've got a bit of an oscillator going on here that's a little bit more interesting than the basic shapes. Let's play around a little bit with modulating both the position, so we're moving a little bit in the wavetable, and also down here in the warp or fold area. So let's get a little bit of movement from that, and we're going to use either envelopes or LFOs over here to do that. So we might have a bit of warp here, and then we're going to pop into the matrix, and because I've clicked on that, the last thing I've done here, it's already available to me, and I can use the very same envelope here, the amp envelope, to modulate that, and it gives it a little bit of movement. Anytime though I adjust the amp envelope, that's going to obviously affect that movement. So if you don't want that to happen, then simply leave the amp envelope and go to envelope 2 or 3. We've got 2 to work with, so that way we can kind of, you know, get a little bit of a different feeling from that. So let's go over. Big jump interval, yeah, absolutely, Xavi Diaz. Octaves are great, and you'll see why in a little bit. In terms of the biggest jump is here. That's the octave from B. Actually, I went a bit far, thanks. Didn't mean to go perhaps to the B4. B3 would be fine, but B3, B4 could be interesting as well, so perhaps well spotted. But I'm going to leave it as B4 for a moment, because I think that might be more interesting actually with what's going to come. All right, so cracking on here, well picked up, Xavi, but yes, big intervals are fine on leads and melodies and things, if it all kind of makes sense in a little bit. So let's maybe use envelope 2 to do what I was going to do, which is modulate that warping a bit. And that means that this can be a different shape to the amp, and there's no sort of issues going on there, right? So we've got now a little bit of movement here, and once you've modulated the warp here, you'll notice if you change from FM, so does the character. So you can keep your mapping here, and you can actually flick through the different changes to this area and decide, do you want pulse width modulation? Do you want FM tuning modulation, or just the modern warping, right? So it's quite a nice feature. I think you can actually just modulate it and then change that around. Similarly, we can now change our oscillator. Keeping our movement, right? Which is quite nice, because then we could try out lots of different sounds here till we kind of find the one we're looking for, or the one we appreciate. All right, so I'm just going to settle on one of those, as I said, but as you can see, it's fairly easy to change that around. Let's do something similar with now the oscillator positioning as well of 1, and let's have a bit of modulation on that, and we can use the same envelope, or we could use an LFO, or again the amp envelope. And we can go positive direction, so we can move through the wavetable that way, or we can come down. So we've got a little bit of movement happening now in our oscillator over here, right? Let's bring our filter down a bit. I'll just bring the metronome down a bit as well. So let's have either the amp envelope or again envelope 2 on this filter frequency of the cutoff here. So I'm going to use the amp envelope for the moment. Because I want that kind of nice plucky, fast kind of envelope, and this is a very plucky envelope at the moment on the amp, so it kind of fits. Envelope 2 is a little bit different, right? So if we put envelope 2 on the filter cutoff, it's going to react differently. So it opens and closes the filter based on this shape, but actually I kind of like this shape more because I want a fast opening and closing of the filter. It gives you that nice, really plucky sound. Okay, let's bring it a little bit of unison. Turn up the amount a bit. And again, we could try out, there's lots of different unison styles here. Let's just have a classic. Bring it down a little bit. Just reading the comments there, Chubby Ears. It's like, hi there, I'm the hook, listen and remember the following short interval, remember. I like it. Yeah, it's kind of nice. As I said, it was a mistake that it was up on the 4 in that octave, but what I'm deliberately doing here, kind of just to come back to the MIDI for a second, is if we were to make the triad here, the root triad, and then we add the octave on it, this is a really good way to make a nice simple pattern, because you're essentially just working really with 3 notes of the triad, which you can see over here. This one's outside the triad, but it would be, yeah, it's not really in the typical chord here, the typical triad, because we normally skip a note, play a note, but this one's the odd one out, which gives us a bit of tension. But these 4 notes, including the octave, then means that you can make really good patterns just with those intervals. The octaves, you could also have the octave down. So we're a little bit low at B2 for a lead, but if you're higher up, you can also then obviously include, that could be B2, this could be B3 and B4. So octaves are great when you're trying to build little sequences, to include that as part of your sequence, and you can keep it kind of simple that way, but effective. Right. So we've got a little bit of movement, bit of unison, bit of action going on here. Now, one of my favorite things I'd like to do to hit this is, as well as the filter cutoff being modulated by the amp envelope, I'd like to have an LFO on that. But let's bring an oscillator 2 before we do that. And let's detune it a little bit. Positive sense or negative. Generally, if you set them apart from each other, you get a little bit of detuning. We do have unison on, which kind of detunes the voices as well, but it's nice to manually add this a bit and put one in a negative direction and one in a positive direction. And you can get a nice little bit of detuning going on. Let's also maybe pitch down the square. We could also bring in the sub oscillator. At the moment, we've got nothing, no competition. bring up the tone a bit. I'm not sure I'm going to go for -1. I'm going to leave myself room below this. So we're adding, at the moment, if we leave it at -1, we're adding an octave lower of the same synth pattern. So effectively below all this, we are now with B, B1, B3. All these notes are ghosting a note lower than we see in the MIDI, right? Whereas if it's at 0, we're not doing that. We're just adding a bit more of a tone from this sub oscillator. So think of it like oscillator 3 almost. So we might also wiggle the square a bit, and we could use again our oscillator envelope that we've got in the mix at the moment. So all of this is getting this working without anything else yet, right? No effects or anything like that. It's all going on in the synth itself. So the thing I want to try, which is, again, we're going for kind of a quirky, strong lead sound first here before we get everywhere else. I'm going to copy the MIDI down, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab all this MIDI here, and I'm going to drag it so that it goes over each other, like so. So what we could do first is make it all legato, which kind of brings everything together so they're all butting up against each other. Let's listen to that, and let's make this clip a different color so we know something else happens here. All right. So now I'm going to stretch the ends of these. So it sounds a bit weird at the moment. But let's fix that. So now what we're going to do is going to bring the glide in here. And we're going to go back to our amp envelope. And get this kind of quirky little bit of glide action going on. So this jump here is really good for the glide because it's gliding from this note all the way up those 2 octaves, which was the reason that I kind of left that for a moment so high up as well, because and if the notes don't overlap, we get that. Right, so if we want the glide to be part of the ball game, we need to have a little bit of overlap. But what we're going to do is we're going to have some overlap and some not. So let's say that the end notes here re-trigger without the glide. And if we bring this one down, still sounds cool, but here we got more kind of bend up to there. And the glide time can get a lot wilder than it is, but I tried to make it work with the metronome, right? I'm listening to the rhythm and just doing it by ear. So shorter, I get that kind of sounds. Right, so almost not obvious at all. Pretty cool, right? So we can kind of do that by ear and dial in how much we want of that. And this, by the way, I'm not sure if you're here in the stream today. I don't see your name in the comments there, but Blank Poster Music, a producer or part of the community here on YouTube, often I see in my streams, posted some music and asked, how is this sound made? And I had to listen to the track that he or she shared with me. And it was all about glide. It was all about this glide being applied to the lead to get that kind of bending. And it's not pitch bend, it's the synth itself is gliding up to the next note. Right? So important that the synth is if you want to do this, it's important that you put the synth in monophonic, and it's important that there's overlap. I mean, analog, the synth analog in Ableton's Locker does glides really, really easily. Some of the other ones, you need to be a bit more careful about making sure there's overlaps and things like that. Whereas analog, I think you can do it almost with just the envelopes. You noticed I had to also adjust the envelope, because if the decay is too short and the release is short, we don't get glide either, right? But okay, so now I'm going to add to my filter cutoff what I wanted to do as well, which is get a bit more groove into this. And we're going to do that with an LFO, and we're going to apply it to the cutoff. But we're going to turn this LFO into something a little bit faster. And we could change from a sine wave to lots of the different shapes here. So we could have a random. So that rhythm's not going to be constant, it's all over the place. And we can bring the amount right down so it could be very subtle. We could use square wave if you want a really choppy sound, or the sawtooth. And much like the glide time, I can play around with this. I'm not going to note sync it, so I could choose to sync this LFO to 8/16 16ths, quarters, and it's going to be very rhythmically on time with everything else in the project. Because I'm trying to make a bit of a quirky kind of lead sound here, something a bit different, I'm trying to come up with things that are a little bit between the lines, right? So if we don't note sync it and leave it in frequency, we can use our ears to kind of decide that rate and have it a little bit quirky, so it's a little bit not super out of time, but just a little bit off. Soften the attack on the amp if we want. Pretty cool, right? All that's just the synth. There's no effects or anything. It's the synth doing all the lifting. And this is what I love about sort of making your sounds from scratch, learning a bit of the synthesis and understanding kind of what's going on here. And if you are new to this channel, there's a whole series of 3 2-hour streams going through part 1, part 2, and part 3 of learning synthesis, where I sort of broke down the importance of, well, how to approach each synth the right way, all the different building blocks. And step 3 is definitely a bit more pro. It's a bit more like what we're looking at here, how to get sort of like the professional touches. But what's great, if you like a challenge like me, set yourself to try and get all this movement and action happening just in the synth before we go popping all these different effects and things behind it, right? Lower attack equals plus swing. Well, yeah, if we move the attack around as well, we're sort of changing around the feeling and timing. We get a different sound, particularly to the synth with the softer attack. It's less plucky. So here, very sharp. and plucky attack to the volume envelope. There's more sort of wah-wah sounds, and we can do that with the filter, the envelope we're using to do the filter cutoff as well. Lots of different tones, right? Lots. All right, so let's add a little bit of effect to this, and let's grab Ableton's hybrid reverb, and we're going to do something a bit special with that as well. So let's switch that on. Bring down the dry wet a bit, or maybe I'll leave it up for a second while we play around with the sound. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the blend knob here on the hybrid all the way over to just the convolution side, like so. And if I play around with the size here, we can get a big old reverb. But before we do that, let's do something that's very unique to the hybrid, which I love. And it's over in this section here. So a lot of things like decay and size, that's a fairly standard part of every sort of reverb you're going to use. That's setting how long the reverb takes to decay to silence, the size of it, you know, in terms of stereo, whether it's very narrow or wide, sort of the actual physical size of the reverb reflections. We do have a stereo mono knob over on the right here on the hybrid, so you can actually make your reverbs mono if you bring it to 0%. 100 it's sort of in the middle, and you can go all the way around to 200 to make it really wide, so you have a width control here. But the size of the reverb also changes, like the room size, right? It's kind of, when we pump that up, it turns out like it sounds like it's in a really big boomy room. So what I do love though about the hybrid reverb is over here. So what is pre-delay on a reverb? If you know what that is, you can drop that in the comments in the chat. It'd be interesting to hear if someone there can answer that question. What does pre-delay do? Whilst we're thinking about that, what we can do uniquely to hybrid reverb with the pre-delay is similarly to things like the LFO, we can put in note sync or in frequency. We can put the hybrid reverb in milliseconds, which is very standard. So if we were to grab Ableton's OG reverb, we'll see that over here the pre-delay is only in milliseconds here, right? Whereas with the hybrid, we can note sync it, and that's kind of quite interesting. Delay the reverb. I need a little, Chavi Diaz with the answer there. I need a little bit more information, because actually, yeah, so when you say delay the reverb, can you explain that a little further? What's happening with the dry sound versus what's happening when the reverb sound is happening? Yeah, I get, obviously the name pre-delay suggests something, right? But I think there's a good way to describe it. I'm gonna tell you in a moment. But what's interesting about hybrid is we can put it in note sync, so we can change the way the pre-delay happens, which is quite unique from what we have in Ableton, because most reverbs do the pre-delay in milliseconds. I'll just answer it so that we can crack on, because you're right that it delays the reverb, but I think what we need to understand is that pre-delay, if we don't have any pre-delay, the reverb is bang on the sound as soon as the sound happens. What is pre-delay is doing is actually letting the dry sound through for however long the pre-delay is before the delay happens. And that's a bit of a big deal, because the longer the pre-delay, the more you're letting through the original sound before it's being affected by the delay. The shorter that is, or if it's nothing, you are just slapping the delay straight onto the sound. So do try playing around with that, because that can make a big difference. You're letting the dry sound through before the reverb is being applied. So it's like having an attack almost, and saying you're not coming in straight away, you're coming in later. So these are important little controls that make quite a difference, because you're sort of giving a fade, letting the dry sound through, and then bang, the reverb starts on there, right? So I'm going to put it in pre-delay in the note sync, and I'm going to play around with this amount here, and I'm also going to give ourselves some feedback here, which is great because also the hybrid has a feedback section to it, and that's going to be lots of fun. So let's maybe listen to the feedback first. Let's put the pre-delay in its default. So we can feed the delay back in on itself, which is always a good idea for a nice kind of unique sound. And now let's play around with this. So if we're in milliseconds, that sounds really cool, right? Because it sort of sounds like we are adding a delay effect, but we're not. We're kind of playing between the start of the reverb and the dry sound coming through. So it can get very, very wonky. So this could be something that you could automate in your track. So let's try it in note sync. Right? So now you can get like a proper rhythmical delay going on just in the reverb. Bit of feedback. Sounds super, super nice, right? So that's just very, very simple at the moment. We've just got our synth, we've got this hybrid reverb delay, pre-delay we're messing around with, a bit of feedback, and we've got this really, really cool kind of sound starting to develop here. So today is definitely sound design, right? Again, it's this theme coming from Daniel Miller's chat. And by the way, maybe I failed to mention it, that when Daniel Miller was talking to Ableton Live about working with Depeche Mode and releasing these artists on Mute, his record label, it's either the first or one of the Depeche Mode, I think possibly all of the Depeche Mode albums, but the one where Daniel Miller was involved as a producer, they set as a rule from the start, no presets. And that was a rule. And I like things like that. Limitations are liberating, right? It's just giving you something condition, which in this modern world of computers and VSTs and thousands of presets, you know, it can be really good to set yourself constraints, as we call them, limitations. Just work with a few materials, but what's going on here sound-wise isn't going on anywhere else. It's not in Ableton's browser, it's nowhere else, but it's here right now. Adrian Dantas, how are you doing, my friends? Welcome. So this is what we got so far. And we've even got a bit of a sort of metallic-y kind of character happening. We could definitely play around with, again, some of the different styles of oscillators. And I can keep all my lovely modulation that I've already got. So nice, we've got a pretty cool synth sound, this kind of lead, and it's playing around a lot with the glide up here. So again, we could make some variations of this. No glide, the original pattern I started with. Let's copy this one down. Let's take away a couple of notes. I think we've got a nice starting point here. Right, so maybe we're going to kill off the metronome. That might be, you know, enough of the metronome for now. So let's just plug in a bit of a simple kick drum so we can kind of get cracking with that. Let's turn off scale for a moment. We'll just put in a 4/4 kick pattern, and let's maybe use a sample today, just a nice like punchy kick sample, drum sample. All right, this one here will do. You can also play around with the reverb here, and there's a couple of these that I quite like, so let me skip through. Right, that reverb, because of all the reflections here. Oh yeah. So I'll leave it up to you if you feel that that's not worth all that work so far of where are we up to, you know, 40 minutes or so to get this sound. But again, I've learned a lot as I've gone along. I understand what glide does, what all this little bit of modulation's doing in the matrix, how it's moving everything around a little bit. What I could automate from this in the track in the future that could open and close or move around. What the reverb's doing over here, and how I'm just using that to create, like, again, a sound that sounds like it's got a delay on it and more complicated effects chain than it does. It's just the beautiful hybrid reverb that Ableton gives us. Let's put a saturator in between. I'm already pretty happy with the power in this sound, but we could maybe just have a little bit of saturation as well. A little ghost kick in there just to give us a little bit more groove. All right, let's work on another synth of sorts to go with our lead. So we're going to call that our lead synth for today. And this could work really well in tech house, like with the melodic edge to it, progressive house, melodic techno, melodic house, and we can strip it down just to a simple few notes. Right, so all those different patterns work quite nicely, and we could morph between those throughout the track. So we're in B minor. Let's write something here that's a bit more of a sequence. So we could kind of do it like literally just putting all the B's across for a moment. Let's randomize the velocity on those. Let's grab perhaps analog for this or meld. But let's do another thing preset wise that we could do, which is let's make a layered instrument here. So let's group an analog. So drop it on the track. You can either right click and group it, or Command G or Control G, pop it in a group, and we're going to drop a meld in this group as well. I'm going to switch off oscillator B, and we'll come back to it in a moment, but we'll start with analog as the first layer of this. And all I'm going to do in here is start muting a few notes here and moving some pitches of some. So I might take out all the kick positions. Something like that. Let's bring the note length a bit shorter. Similarly, we could copy that down. Let's make a change or two. Let's bring this up an octave. We might try the other direction. Okay, now let's work on the synth a bit. So let's detune our oscillators apart. Let's put it again in monophonic like we did with the wavetable. We don't need a polyphonic synth here. We're not playing chords or anything. So again, we can use glide, and as I was mentioning previously, that the glide in analog is a bit easier to dial in than some of the other synths, but important generally is to put your synth in monophonic, and then we can get that gliding between the notes, because as you can see with the analog, we don't have overlapping notes here, but we are gliding between the different notes. So analog definitely works a little bit different to how the wavetable does. The wavetable, it's a little bit more traditional in the sense that the glide works best when you have overlapping notes where there is some form of, sorry, I just forgot which clip it was. This one here, we got a higher note, yeah. So where that sort of overlaps there and here is where that glide happens, and we can hear the bending up to those notes or bending down, whichever way it is. So what is the function of this melodic sequence on the track? Another harmony, another melody to go in the track. That's the idea behind it at the moment. So it's, yeah, a collaborative partner to the lead that we've got so far. So I might not have glide on this one, but as you can hear with analog, if I put it back into poly, the glide's not really doing anything, right? So just so you could learn glide, but if I put it back to monophonic, right? Just to show you that analog's a bit different, but we've got our glide on the lead. So Chavi Diaz, the idea is those two playing together as a family, which I think they do quite well. Harmonies. So if we open up this one and we look at that, they're currently having a conversation with each other, and they can have even more of a conversation if we wish, but right now they're just harmonies. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, let's work on the sound a bit. And before we do the filter, let's look at the amp envelope. So again, we could have it plucky. And for me, it's going to be a plucky synth here. I don't want it to tread all over the lead. I want the two to work together. Something like that for the moment. And similarly to the wavetable, on the filter, on its envelope, we're going to get it nice and plucky again and short, so it's very snappy, responsive movement to the cutoff. And we do that and then we can play around with the amount how much of this envelope that I've got here, this now very short, plucky filter envelope, how much of that is being applied to the cutoff. Well, that's kind of funny. My mouse just stopped working. 1 second. It could be a battery change. We'll try that. Never had that live in the stream, so here's a first for you, ladies and gents. Hopefully that's what it is. But it's kind of a funny one. Proves that we're live, right? Otherwise it's something else, but we'll just see. Quick battery change. There we go. So indeed, looks like the battery expired. Let me just move that out the way there. Luckily had something close to hand. All right, let's get back into it. So where were we? We've got some detuning. We've got a filter envelope that's short, tight and plucky. We're looking at the envelope amount. We can have a bit of unison. Gives us a little bit more detuning. Let's also have this envelope that's being applied to the filter. And what I'm just sort of doing there, this can be another really nice thing that you can do, which is actually, instead of modulating your cutoff, the filter, which many people do, automate and modulate this in the track, you can actually modulate the envelope amount, and it's a bit of a different feeling. You're applying how much envelope is leaving the cutoff frequency somewhere static, maybe, like there. And you're deciding how much of that plucky envelope is affecting that cutoff. I'm thinking in a kind of melodic sequence done in the background, gluing the different sections of the track. Well, it's going to end up a bit like that, so I think you're on the right track. That's what it's going to end up doing. So while we're down in here with this envelope, I'm going to use a bit of envelope on the resonance. And that's going to move this a little bit. Just a little bit. So I'm just trying to fit it nicely now around my lead. So it is in the background chubby, just a little bit of a plucky kind of lead that's sitting there in the back. Sequence, should I say. Let's also see what it sounds like if we go up an octave. Bit too high, so I'm going to keep it like that. So another variation of this, we could do a call and response here. So we could bring another copy of this down and we could say, you know, this is the response clip. And we're going to put essentially one of these we're going to take out. So perhaps we'll take for a second this sequence here, and then we're going to give that a partner from here. And we're going to duplicate this clip, and the response is happening in the first section. So we could have the first section here out, right? So if we play this scene, we could have a few more notes perhaps. But what we need to do is kind of make them matching. I just realized that this was 2 bars and this is just 1 bar. So let's make that 2 bars, and then we're sort of a little bit more in the same game, so we can actually have all these notes back in over here as well, right? So let me just check what I had. Okay, so it's basically just the kick notes that I took away, which are these ones. So we'll just put it back to that. So it should be something like that. Let's try that. So they could be having a conversation if you wanted, but I kind of like them as a harmony where the sequence at the moment is in the background. Because that to me gives me the feeling I'm looking for here. All right, so let's work on our sequence a bit more. So I'm going to name that, do a little bit of housekeeping here. If you are just joining the stream, by the way, don't be shy. Do feel free to say hello in the chat. We've got Adrian Dantas and Xavi Diaz in the chat at the moment in the stream. Feel free to drop us a hello. Let us know how you're doing. Also, there's a question there which you can feel free to answer. What's one sound you've always wanted to create? Do let me know in the chat there that you haven't been able to create. And as I said, I hope you're enjoying this live stream here on a Sunday from Ibiza. And we're looking at no presets. We put presets out. We're making stuff from scratch. We are learning that this could actually accelerate us to finding our own unique and distinct sound a lot faster than just, you know, grabbing presets. I do like presets. I understand their purpose. I know that we can tweak them and make them our own. But if you spend a bit of time doing what we're doing here today, you can find a lot quicker your sound, and you can have things on your computer that no one else has. AI doesn't have it either. It's on your computer and on your computer only. And we're just using Ableton stuff here. We're not using anything from outside of Ableton either. So I want this a little brighter. So now I'm going to bring the meld layer in. And I'm going to change the oscillator shape to one of these, the swarm. Maybe the saw or the square. Let's put the meld into scale awareness so that it's going to follow the tuning. We're in B minor today, which is a nice scale for a bit of tension, a bit of kind of feeling. So let's pop on the scale awareness over here. Similarly, we don't need to be in polyphonic, so we can be in monophonic inside of the meld. And we're going to add this layer to the analog, right? So we're going to have a nice kind of meld layer and analog together to give us our final sound. Just popping in the chat for a second. Adrian Dantas, Ableton Live always was my #1 door, but watching your live streams just increased my love for it. Thank you very much. That's something we, very happy to hear that, especially because you demonstrate how to leverage the instruments that come with the software and also use a lot the session viewer. Yes, I think leveraging the instruments that come with the software, hopefully for you guys and girls, really opens your mind, because you don't have to go and spend, if you can spend your money if you like on Serum or Massive or all those beautiful synths as well, but you can do pretty much anything you want inside of Ableton. It's just learning the tools, right? So now I'm adding the analog back in. Maybe change one of these oscillators to a square. Back on the meld. Let's get into the modulation section of the synth a bit. So let's open up the matrix. And I'm just going to use the small matrix because what's actually kind of handy about the matrix and the meld here. So I'm only using oscillator A and I'm layering it with this analog that started the patch, let's say. And yeah, instead of like, you can open all of that if you like and have the blown up view, but this can actually be quite useful because it kind of condenses it. Maybe you don't get quite so lost and you can play around with all the different modulation options all along the sort of horizontal line here. So you've got your amp envelope there, you've got the modulation envelope over here, there, everything's down the bottom here. And what I quite like to do, which is what I'll show you, is let's say we just play this and solo it. We can come down to that modulation here and we could grab something like the filter cutoff and modulate it with any of these sources and hear what it sounds like. So let's have the modulation envelope on this. So again, I want a nice plucky opening of that. Let's try some movement. So I can use the shape of the amp envelope to modulate this. I can use this nice plucky envelope. Similarly, the LFOs, we've got 3 different options, right? So there's lots of different choices here, and even without doing too much adjustment, we can try this envelope versus this envelope. So let's go back to the motion. Macro 1. So it's the amp envelope, it's a bit wild, but the modulation envelope, more subtle before it starts getting a bit wild. So that's moving this one around. What about if we try the spacing? Nice. Really nice. So, you know, but you could also go to the spacer, second macro, try LFO. Different feeling, and then you can go and adjust all of these, but you can just try them out in their default. So I'm really liking the plucky mod envelope on macro 2. And we've got the mod envelope on the cutoff here. Let's try out some of the other filters. Let's try the bandpass. Or the filter maybe if we want a bit of dirt. And let's bring the analog layer in. I take the meld away, just with a bit of simple, and if we move oscillators a bit, let's try to the left. If we want to saw, quite like the square, and it can get kind of wild. I like the motion where I had it more or less. I do like the spacing around there somewhere. Let's give it a bit of spread. Maybe we already have a bit of spread right on the panning here. Just give it a little bit, but we can make that sound a bit wider in a moment. So now, if we take the analog away, we've got that layer. But together, we've got something interesting, right? Bringing down my lead a bit. Okay, so let's polish the sequence a bit. Adrian analog is attack bright and the meld is kind of tail acid part. Yeah, I think that's kind of good. I think I hadn't really thought as deeply, but yeah, the analog's sort of bright and plucky, and the meld's now just got a bit of dirt through the filter, and also this spacing and a bit of modulation on that spacing, I think is helping a little bit to give it a little bit of a feeling to it. So let's say maybe with the sequence, let's try our glide. Could be fun, but not really necessary. So let's give it a bit of processing, and let's just use a standard delay. And let's have a little bit of modulation. On the time, but we could also put this out of note sync. Turn up our delay, big difference. Let's maybe bring down the dry wet. Bit of hybrid. So that's a really solid sequence in itself. Let's take the meld away. Take the analog away. So they really contribute nicely to the layers. You could also try panning them apart here. So let's move the meld over to the left a bit. Nice. So we've got a bit of a wider synth. Let's pan them apart a bit. We do want it to fit together with the lead that we've already got. So not too wide, but a little bit of difference from the left and right of each instrument. I think it's quite nice. That's something else we might try here on the sequence. Just looking in the chat again, Chavidias. Analog is attack bright and the meld is kind of tail acid part. How would you describe it? Yeah, I think, as I said, I kind of don't really have a description on the top of my head at the moment, but it's kind of coming together as one, but they would work on their own. But the idea is to kind of, again, we're making our own sort of preset here layered with these two synths. So let's have, for a bit of fun here, a bit of beat repeat in here. And let's see if we can kind of make this pattern kind of juggle up a little bit. Yeah, nice. So now we get little repeats. If I turn the pitch decay on, it'll help you hear them. Maybe I'll also make it just one synth. Nice. So we've got a whole new pattern. That just is constant. If we put this on, you get these lovely little fills, and the variation gives us 3 different types of fills, giving us quarter note variations every half a bar. So all sorts of fun. Maybe you want it to happen every 1 bar, but I kind of like it happening a bit more quicker like that. Right, I think it's time for a bass line, hi-hat, a clap, a few extra things in here. So let's maybe do a fast hi-hat. When I say fast, let's say we make our own hi-hat with some noise. So we're just going to have on the off beats. Let's give that a little bit of randomization on the velocity, not too much. Let's grab ourselves the analog, pop that onto there. Oscillator, only one oscillator in the noise. And then let's bring the amp envelope. And we can use the resonance and the filter to darken, give ourselves little different characters to the hi-hat if we want. Balance the noise with a bit of metallic if you wish. So it's a bit of a different sounding hi-hat with that resonance and the filter in the game. And let's do a little turnaround here. We kind of need to get that little turnaround. We kind of need operator would be better, because the thing is with analog, the noise oscillator is just white noise, and white noise doesn't pitch up or down in frequency. It stays constant. It's all a massive frequency. So maybe if we change this to the operator and we just use oscillator A, the difference with operator we've got is a different noise engine in here. So in here we can access the waveform, and we've got noise looped. So it's a little bit different. You've got the white noise, the same as analog, but you've got noise looped as well. So we should be able to hear that that is down an octave. Yeah. So you hear it go down in pitch, right? Bring it up a little bit, doesn't have to be that low. Just gives it a bit of interest at the end here. Okay, now let's shape our envelope a bit. And we can do exactly the same as we're doing in the analog with the filter, if we wish. What we could do is have a bit of pitch envelope here as well. We're going to use that in a moment on the bass line, but it's not such a big change here on the hi-hat that was worth a thought. Maybe add a bit of spread, a little bit of width on those. Nice. Let's get a bit of erosion on there just for a bit more character. Let's try our beat repeat trick here as well. So every now and then we're getting some nice little fills here, right? And if we put this back in white noise, you can hear it's a different sounding hi-hat, but we don't really get much. We get a little bit of change in the operator compared to the analog. We can hear this. There's a bit of a different note, different velocity, but not the same as the looped noise, which gives us really the clear pitching down. So you can decide what you prefer there. So I'm just back in playing around a bit with the instruments. Nice. So let's have a clap sample, something nice and sort of organic over here. Saved a few little favorite clap selections. This very first one will be fine. This is the part where there's obviously no preset action. We're just using samples. It's nothing too educational, more just for the groove. Let's make those lazy, a little bit late. Someone say bass. I think it might be time to have some bass. Right, so we've got kick, lead, sequence. This one's our hi-hat that we've made with a bit of white noise. Why do that? Again, why do that? Well, there's a little bit of flexibility there. We've got this nice envelope that we can modulate the decays around. It's not a sample, so we can play around with some different components that we don't get if we're working in a sample. So there are often advantages, but it's all fair game. By the way, if you're enjoying the live stream and you are here with us today on this Sunday, do drop us a hello. Let us know how you're doing. Yeah, it'd be great to hear where you tuned in and listening from. And I hope you're enjoying the stream. Hope you're finding it useful. Yeah, and some of these will definitely get used because they add more space. Now I quite like that, just coming in the second part of the bar, turns the focus on this. Gives us more room to have more delay. Get some bit of saturation in this. Dirty this one up a little bit as well. Could also try something fun on this one in a little bit. I got distracted, didn't I? I think I was planning on making a bass, but you know, sometimes these things happen. You go down a rabbit hole. All right, operator for a bass. All analog stuff so far here. Sorry, all Ableton Live instruments that we're working with today to get what we've got here, and effects. But again, we're sort of not reaching for presets. We're kind of making some stuff from scratch here. So operator bass line, maybe, again, we're in B minor, something that sort of is a bit of a rolling bass, but we'll start basic and then we'll build it a little bit as we go, bit of velocity so we feel like a bit of human action in there. So I've left the lead off for a moment. They're all working together nicely, but they also play together nicely on their own. And that lead, I think it was worth playing around with because of the glide. All right, let's work on this bass a bit. So let's say with the bass, we're going to have a couple of oscillators, but we're going to take it out of FM mode, the default. We're going to put it in subtractive, And with the first, we might have a square wave. And then we might have a second square. So an oscillator B. And let's detune them apart. Let's try the chorus as well. Work on our envelopes. Wrong synth. Make these a little bit different to each other. Let's try a little spread. Could do. Let's have a bit of pitch envelope on this bass synth. And it will sound a bit more like a, let's take a few things out here. It's got a little bit more sharpness to it because we've kind of brought up the initial and the peak and the decay in. So it sounds a bit weird in the beginning when you turn this on and you say 100% pitch envelope, but if we just do a little change here just so you can hear this. Can sound a bit more like a kick drum quite quickly just by bringing in, creating that little bit of pitch envelope on the attack. So a nice little trick for your bass lines, just to be a bit snappier, give them a little bit of pitch bend in the front. So we might bring our notes down a little lower, they're in the 2s. Might just try and make this one a little longer. Okay, let's get that rolling with the kick. And tighten the clap up a little bit. Let's bring in our other oscillator. Let's go to the filter now. Let's have a bit of filter envelope on this. Bass. We want it kind of more with that kind of snappy filter envelope here as well. If you want a muted bass. Doing it nice and bright, right? This is all because this envelope is now controlling this cutoff. Take away the pitch envelope. more subtle, that. And it just gives it a little bit more snap. Okay, let's have a bit of overdrive on the bass. Bring it down, dry wet. So maybe we've got room for something else as well. Perhaps something like a little snappy stab or a chord or something. Playing around a little bit with the length of notes on the bass. Just adding a little bit of a variation over here. Leave that out for now. All right, let's get on our melodies a bit. Just get an EQ in here just to clean up any low end that we don't need. Yeah, I think I'm going even lower on the bass there. So I've just pitched down the coarse tuning to drop that bass even a bit lower. Nice. Let's have a bit of drum bus on our kick while we're in here in the effects. Bring it down on the dry wet a bit, because drum bus is quite addictive for how much louder it makes things make. We just want a bit of character from it. Bit of EQ work on here as well, on our bass. In this case, just A being that. On our hat, look at all that bass. We don't want that. On our synth hi-hat. Bass with a long, just looking at the comments there, what do I think about a bass line with a long attack instead? Could be interesting. I mean, the answer would be why the long attack? I would generally have a long attack bass line if perhaps it was following the chords, or I was looking to give more space to a big boomier kick. Here we've got a short punchy kick, so not too much conflict. So I think the attack of the bass, what is it, the relationship with the kick and the low end, and if you've got a slow long attack on the bass line, yeah, how's that going to sound with the elements you've got? So if we're doing that here, it really needs to be a longer note and a more sort of, as I said, sustained. In this case, it's a sort of plucky bass line going with the theme of snappiness. You could always roll it off the attack a little bit. This would help the transient of the kick come through if there's a conflict there. We could also add a bit of sidechain. But yeah, it's a decision about, depending on what your plan is with your bass line and the rest of your low end, etc. But yeah, long attacks in basses are fine. But this example, we're not really in that sort of direction. Okay, let's try and see if we've got room for something else. We could have a low pad or a stab, something else musical, I'm thinking, just to try it out. Also could be nice to have a vocal in here. We could add some percussion as well, but let's see if there's room for one last little bit of harmony. I mean, to be honest, if we wanted to check those things, if we bring these tracks in together a bit, we can open up the sequence. Let's give these some new colors actually, so they're away from some colors I use for other things. Say with the lead we go a different blue, and maybe the bass traditionally for me is going to be something like maybe in the reds. So if we've got this sequence open, we can layer those across and we can kind of see there's a fair bit of interplay going on, but the nice thing about this is they are spread apart a bit, which is good. So we've got kind of harmonies, but they're not all sat on top of each other. And when they do play at the same time, they're kind of spread out. So naturally this kind of has room to breathe and sound quite good. And we could do lots of work here where if we wanted, we could kind of minimize things playing. You know, this note could be muted there and just those play. So I like to build things where they're quite full, and we can go backwards from here and make clips where there's less happening, not more, let's say. So we could take things away to give more space at different times during the track. So if I was making variations of what we've got so far, we could make other clips that were less busy. So let's maybe we'll try drift on this one. We haven't used a drift today. Try out some of the other oscillators and move the shaping a bit as well. Nice. If you want something smooth like this. Get a little bit of velocity change into these. Then we can use velocity to modulate the frequency cutoff of the filter in here. So maybe on this drift chords, we can get a bit of modulation into it. So we've got the velocity, if we make that 0, there's no movement of this cutoff, but we can modulate that with envelope 2, this envelope down here. or we can use velocity, which I kind of quite like. So the different velocities of the notes. And then maybe we'll have a bit of a LFO action as well. Shape can be nice to modulate over here. We could do that in here perhaps. So we can go into here and we can choose what we want to modulate. So we want oscillator 1 shape. And then what are we going to modulate it with? Say an LFO. So now we're wobbling this, and you can see that down here. So it can sound like the chords are a bit choppy. I'm going to leave oscillator 2 off because it's too much frequency. So we squeeze those chords in, right? Let's process them with a little bit of reverb. We could make, to Chavi's Diaz's suggestion earlier about slow attack on the bass, have a long attack on these chords. So what am I doing there? So I've just basically dropped on a hybrid reverb, and I've put, in this case, we've used hybrid already today, but I've moved the blend knob all the way over to the right, put on this lovely shimmer algorithm, which kind of creates this 12 semitone repitching in the reverb. So we kind of get an extra layer almost to those chords through the reverb over here. So this hybrid reverb, been using a little bit today, but it's such a great effect. It's got so much depth to it in terms of what we can do inside of it, just in that reverb. So if I turn off the shimmer, got this beautiful layer. I've just added feedback to it as well. So I've put the blend back in the middle, and I put this back to the dark hall. Sounds like that. But if you move the blend knob all the way over to just the algorithmic reverb, we get that. But then if we add the shimmer, we get that lovely character. And we can play around with the pitch as well. We could say, go for a fifth. We could go down. So it layers a lower reverb below, but I like it 12 semitones. Let's maybe try the vintage. Got some nice noise in there as well, and then feedback. Lovely. Sounds like a string almost being layered, right, with this, with the drift. Also also try an envelope on this filter cutoff as well. Yeah, nice. Could also have our choppy LFO on this. Yes, Chavi Diaz, more dreamy, absolutely. Just got to watch out that we don't get carried away and we get too much frequency, right? Because too much frequency, we've got plenty going on now in this track. Things can get a little bit too busy and a little bit muddy, and we don't want to lose our bass and our kick and get everything just blurring together into a pile of mud, right? So this hybrid reverb, such a powerful device. Let's try the pre-delay like we did earlier. Let's try it in note sync. Get a bit of weirdness. Not so much impact on that because it's actually, sorry, that's because I'm all the way over in the algorithmic reverb. So this isn't really having the same effect it did previously. So if I do this, and let's wash it out with lots of size. So just with this hybrid reverb, bit of sound design, messing around in here, the feedback, the pre-delay, the blend knob, are we using algorithmic, are we in the convolution? You can get all sorts of cool sounds in there. And the drift is sounding sweet. We got a bit of movement on it. Just the drift, right? Alex Moreno, how you doing, my friend? I hope you're good. Dollars House Music, a little sound design goes a long way. It does indeed, my friend. So if we start stripping some of this back, we started today with this lead, this glidey, bendy lead. So we could just turn the focus on that with the drums. And then I added a sequence next, which was kind of meant to be in the background. That was this. And this is a patch that I've made layering analog with the meld. If we take away, actually the meld switched off, which I didn't realize. So that's the sequence with the two of them together. And we've got some good little tricks going on with the effects. The beat repeat is changing the pattern, all sorts of fun stuff. And a bit of bass, which is an operator, but with some pitch envelope and some filter envelope. And all of these instruments, they've got lots of room to shape. And then finally, pop this drift in. That's something extra, right? And I guess, as I said, what I like to try and do, as you've sort of seen as I've gone along here, is I like to kind of build things that can all play together, can all work together. They can all, you know, fit together and work together at the peak of the song. But we've got all sorts of options here in terms of modulation, automation, taking things out, putting things back in. And the groove's super simple here at the moment. We've just got a clap, hi-hat and a percussion, and a kick drum. So it could be nice here to add something like, you know, a break beat, or get a nice sort of little bit of organic percussion in here. But maybe, you know, you can pop into something like, this is a live pack in Ableton Live, and there are some good drum breaks in here. Maybe we just grab one of these and we can kind of give it a little bit of a loop in the break somewhere. Could perhaps even shuffle it slightly so it's not playing in the same order that it would have previously. Then we use the transient preserve. But that's not essential. Today it was all about presets and making your own. So everything that's here, apart from the clap sample and the kick sample, just the drum stuff, the hi-hat's made with Operator, so that's on this computer. The bass is on this computer, the lead is on this computer, right? So yes, I'm using instruments that everybody else has access to, but the way I'm tweaking it and the MIDI that's playing it and the effects and how we've sort of taken some of these things a little bit creatively, particularly the hybrid reverb. We've used beat repeat, shuffle up patterns and things. We've got something unique here, and there's a story at the beginning of the video today, so if you did join the stream later, or you're watching back on replay and you're somewhere deeper into the stream, do check that out. The inspiration behind this was Daniel Miller, who is the founder and owner of Mute Records, which released Depeche Mode's music, I think all of their albums bar one, and they had a rule when making the album to not use presets, and the concept behind it is that you learn a lot faster. To, you know, in the beginning your sounds won't maybe sound that great, but that's okay, they're yours, right? And that's this kind of point behind it. It's kind of developing and making your own sounds rather than leaning on presets. And sometimes presets give you more trouble than help because they're full of effects and full of things that you don't know. Everything that's added here, I added. I know what I've put, I know what I can adjust on it, so I've got a lot more control over it. When you plonk a preset on there, you're just hoping, okay, does it fit with everything else? So I'm not anti-presets. I've used them. I think they're great, but in the computer world, in the modern world, you can get lost in that and thinking you need to buy Serum and Massive and this synth and that synth, where you can build it all inside Ableton in the DAW itself. All these instruments are great, they sound great, they can be turned into something, and then it belongs to you. And the more you do that, AI isn't going to be in the mix, somebody else isn't in the mix, it's yours, it's your music, and it's what's going to catch that label's ear or my ear as a DJ when I'm sifting through the tracks and going, well, how did they do that and what is that? So that's probably enough of me ranting and raving. It's been good to have you with me on the stream. Hope you've enjoyed this stream as always, and that perhaps you've taken a few things away from it. I will, as always, link a video at the end here when I can. YouTube always takes a while to, you know, go through and check the stream. So normally it's the following day or something that I can add a card, but I will add a card that is a nice follow-on from this video that I'd suggest you watch next. As always, it's a small favor to ask, but if you did enjoy this video, do consider leaving a comment, sharing it with a friend, giving it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you want to not miss out and know when the next stream's going online. On that note, Alex Moreno, Chavi Diaz, Adrian Dantes, Doorless House Music. It's been great to have you with me as always. Thanks for joining in on the stream. Adrian Dantes, I wish I knew this prior to buying some plugins. Well, it's okay. If you do buy plugins when they're on sale, or, you know, all those good things, just put them to one side and don't be tempted to sort of, you know, use them instead of Ableton's devices, or pick one of those and just do a deep dive in it. Think about, like, you've got Serum, but you don't have the manual. So how are you going to learn how to use it? You're just going to put it on in the project, and you're going to start playing with it. And that's going to get you a lot quicker to understanding it than sort of, as I said, being tricked by. And the people who make those presets, I've been involved in a few of the companies making the presets. We try and program the synths so they sound amazing. That's great. Those presets are amazing and they're programmed very, very well. No lie. It's absolutely the truth. But like I said, it doesn't teach you so much. You can reverse engineer them and learn from presets, and we'll look in the future for sure at ways that we can use creatively presets, because they're something we can play around with. But do encourage you, get out the comfort zone a bit sometimes and try stuff out and see what you learn. Quick flashback. You know, like all of these on their own, they could be the catalyst to a track. So just that sequence with the groove and a vocal or some other stabs or percussion, great. This could take it in another direction if we slow the track right down. Maybe go for something really deep. And then when we start combining them, so basis of a nice track idea, I think, in there, and all those different instruments, they stand on their own. As I said, sometimes the way I work, we've got lots to deal with here, but right back to what I just did a moment ago, that could be all you need here. And then this sequence has lots of room to morph and change. Lots of good fun stuff. Right, that's it for this week's stream. I will see, hopefully, you again on the channel next Sunday. We'll do it again at 3 p.m. Central Eastern Standard Time. So do come and join me for the next stream. I wish you a fantastic rest of your Sunday and weekend, of course. Keep on creating, keep on rocking, and catch you all soon. Thanks a lot, everybody. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.